Hi, my name is Peter Michalak and welcome to my layout, the Hills Line in HO scale. This HO scale layout depicts the South Australian broad gauge main line between Adelaide and Serviceton on the Victorian border, and represents the line as it appeared during the 1980s and early 1990s. Bridgewater itself is based on the former suburban terminus of Bridgewater, which is an Adelaide Hills town, about 40 k's from Adelaide Railway Station. I've modelled it here as it was during my childhood, when we used to take steam-hauled special trains from Keswick up to Bridgewater, where the 85-foot turntable was still in existence for turning steam engines. My childhood growing up was during the broad gauge era, so to model this location has brought back a lot of memories from my childhood. Well, in its present state, Bridgewater is nothing more than a large clearing of land and a main line running through it. There's very little to show for what was originally there. This layout was originally built as an exhibition layout, which after retirement from the exhibition scene in 2016, we converted into a home layout by the addition of extra decking and significantly lengthening the run on the layout. So as it currently stands, the layout's around half finished, and we've still got another deck to install to run across to the border station at Serviceton, as my second interest is modelling the Victorian railways, and that gives me the opportunity to display some of my Victorian rolling stock. Well, as we've got all our tracks all Pico track, England's been particularly hard hit, and as a result the Pico factory actually shut down, and as a result most of our suppliers here in Australia haven't been able to get any stock at all, or the stock that is coming through is heavily reduced, which is making life difficult for us in terms of being able to extend layouts and continue construction of our layouts here. Bridgewater's been built on the traditional open L-deck design, basically a pine frame with light track bed installed. All the scenery on Bridgewater is all the traditional chicken mesh plaster. However, the rest of the layout's been constructed using sculptor mould as the primary scenery base. We've used a large array of different scenery materials on this layout. As we built Bridgewater, things have changed. We've had more and better colours available in static grasses, so the layout's been top dressed with static grass through the Bridgewater section, which is probably the only section at the moment that's scenically complete. However, the branch line was recently partially scenic, and that's all been done with micro nature scenery materials, all of which are in much better Australian colours. When we started this, we only had the very gaunt European style scenery. Now we've been able to get a lot more subdued tones through the whole layout and start blending it all together to make a much better Australian look of late spring, early summer. We were for a long period of time limited in terms of what we had, but now there's a lot better products coming onto the market. There's some local suppliers that are starting to appear as well, which are focusing more on the Australian scenery, and we're starting to get a lot better array of things we can use. The one thing we have found is that I do use a lot of woodland scenic stuff. The American dollar shift has made things perhaps a little more difficult to get because things are more expensive now, and you have to spread those items a lot further to make your money back. But generally, we've been able to use a lot of the English and American products on the layout as much as we can anyway. All our track is generally Code 83 Pico Streamline, points being primarily Pico. There are a couple of odds and ends floating around the layout from Roco, but primarily it's all Pico Code 83. The track behind me in Mile End Yard is all Code 100 track. That's again Pico Streamline, and the branch line, which is representing a lightly laid mallee branch, is laid on Pico Code 75 track. Having used the foam underlay, we saw very limited difference in terms of sound deadening, and certainly by the time you put ballast over your track and secure it down with PVA, there's really no difference in terms of the sound deadening. I lay straight onto the baseboard, and that's just been tacked down with track pins and later ballasted over the top with homemade ballast. Scenery on Bridgewater has been primarily, all the trees have been done from wound wire armatures covered in no-more gaps with polyfibre and Woodland Scenics ground foam scattered over the top of them. Other trees have been done with sedum autumn joy, which is a flowering plant that you can dry, and once that's been dried and coloured, they can be preserved and have Woodland Scenics ground foam scattered over the top of them. They make really good gum trees. The actual road for the main road through Bridgewater is plaster, and that has been coloured with a range of artist chalks and acrylic paints to represent a worn country road, used across the rest of the layout as well. So a plaster base coloured with acrylics and artist chalks. Every building here had to be built from scratch because there's absolutely no kits available on the market to do what we're doing. Of course, subsequently, as soon as we finished Bridgewater, a very similar station building came onto the market. However, this building's been completed, so we're not going to be replacing that anytime soon. This is all built from styrene and strip wood with BGB card roof on the station building. Other buildings on the layout are also all scratch built with homemade brick papers applied to them. They are using the BGB roofing material as well. The layout's controlled with an NCE power cab, and we also have a laptop running the layout with JMRI, allowing us to use our phones as wireless throttles on the layout. Accessory bus is a 5 amp 12 volt system which is provided through the whole layout, and that's providing auxiliary power for point motors and station lights and platform lights and the like. The actual DCC system itself is actually a 5 amp system as well, which provides ample current for the whole layout. We've got that separated currently into two isolated sections with 2 circuit breakers under the layout to prevent the whole layout shutting down in the event of a derailment or a short circuit. Probably South Australia has a very limited modelling base. Certainly things are a lot better than they were 4 or 5 years ago. However, we don't see a massive amount of ready to run stock available. The primary manufacturers here in Australia are based on the East Coast. And for a long period of time, South Australian locos and rolling stock didn't cross the border into Victoria or New South Wales, certainly on the standard gauge anyway. So for us, as a result, as broad gauge modellers, we're lucky in some respects in that a lot of through running occurred, so we did get a lot of ready to run stuff available based on the Victorian prototype. However, the South Australian side of things has been, let's say, not forgotten, but it's a lot more difficult to do in mass numbers to suit the ready-to-run manufacturers. As a result, we've had to go down the path of a lot of scratch building, a lot of kit bashing, and certainly a lot of resin kits, which are produced by our local cottage industry here in South Australia. That's been the way it's been probably since the 1960s, and likely will continue for some time to come. We are slowly becoming more spoilt for choice, but for a lot of the smaller items which make South Australia particularly unique in terms of our vehicles, probably just won't ever see those produced in ready-to-run plastic, just because of the sheer number that they're required to sell in order to make ends meet. And our vehicles, particularly the sort of broad gauge vehicles that I model, probably will never be seen in ready-to-run plastic. Scratch building steam locos for a period of time. I've got a number of kit built steam locos, and they're probably my pride and joy in many respects because there's just not many of them around. Certainly my 620 class steam locomotives that I've built 2 of them. The loco that I built here is 621, which is a tour loco here in South Australia. Probably the loco I'm most proud of. That was a ground up scratch build. The other steam loco kits we now have on the market, which we've built and we have them running on this layout occasionally. Probably also some of the more important items on the layout, solely for the basis that the amount of work that had to go into producing these models. Quite complex. The locos themselves, it's rare that we find something that's a perfect drop fit for a ready-to-run chassis. It'd be nice if they all were, but the first version of the 620s that we did had scratch-built chassis on them. However, having run them at exhibitions for some time, certainly 621's chassis wore quite heavily. and consequently we're able to find a ready-to-run chassis in America with some help from some local modelers here that has been a drop fit and suitably modified to suit. The South Australian prototypes are quite unique in many regards, so there's not an awful lot out there we can use straight off the shelf that will help us replicate these locos. First exhibition layout I actually built was a Victorian-based layout called Liralau. Now, Liralau was originally not meant to be an exhibition layout at all. It was actually a single module designed for photographing completed rolling stock on, which slowly grew and grew and grew and eventually turned into an exhibition layout. Liralau had two separate versions. The first version was a bit rough around the edges, and the second version was had been completely rebuilt with built-in lighting pelmets and a trial design for any future layout, which proved to be too heavy to be able to exhibit easily on a regular basis. With the arrival of a lot more South Australian rolling stock on the modelling scene, I opted to build a new layout in 2013, and that became Bridgewater. As a tip for people, don't get married and try to build a layout at the same time. We got Bridgewater from a frame to being on its first show in the space of about 4 weeks. It was a very, very basic layout when it first went on display. However, we had committed to having this layout on display at the 2013 Adelaide Model Railway exhibition. The layout went on show with no trees, no station buildings, but it was operational. The layout subsequently spent the next 3 years on the exhibition scene, and we toured Victoria with it, we toured South Australia with it, and it won awards at the Noarlunga Model Railroaders exhibition, as well as 2 second place and a first place at the Adelaide Model Railway exhibition in 2016. In 2016, changes at home with the planning of a young family saw us decide that it was time to remove the layout from the exhibition scene and turn it into a home layout. This would allow me time to build the home layout before our first child arrived. So the layout is around 50% complete, so there is still a fair bit to go, but at least we have an operational layout here that if it takes another 10-15 years to complete, will so be it. My workshop's actually not that well equipped really. It's got I've only got a drill press and a 3D printer in there. The rest is all, everything else we do here is hand cut, file shaped using just standard hand tools. We don't really have a lot in there that's anything other than what most people would have in their garden workshops. 3D printing's come a long way in the last few years. We've got a early 3D PLA filament printer here that we use for prototyping. However, with the advent of the SLA type resin printers, the whole 3D printing, certainly now those sort of printers are coming down in price. They're becoming quite affordable. That's helping a lot, particularly with the smaller detail parts, which previously we had to master and then cast in resin. Now we can just run them off on a printer and have them ready in 12 hours, ready for painting and installation on the layout. We've been here since 2011, so the layout's been built over that time. Since 2011, obviously we got married. Our daughter Stephanie arrived in March 2020. I also have a 45mm garden railway that we've established in the yard. This is primarily battery and live steam powered. It has been a long labour of love, having started with a G-scale Christmas train set, which was trialled in the garden to see if it was worthwhile continuing with, and has now evolved into a landscaped and permanent feature of our garden. We have a Facebook blog, which if you look up on Facebook, the Hills Line in HO scale, we regularly update this with information and progress shots of the layout as we're developing different components of it. So that's probably your best place to go for further information on this layout. Thank you all for watching. I trust you've enjoyed viewing this little bit of information about this wonderful layout as we develop it, and we hope that you keep following our progress as we go. if you like this video, please like and subscribe to this channel for more further and intriguing railway content.